it's very much appreciated. And seeing you, knowing that we're continuing to focus on helping the citizens in Georgia during this time. And I know that we're leveraging every resource we have available to do so. I know the local areas have made adjustments, and everybody's looking for ways to better serve what's in our state. And I just want to, on behalf of all of our citizens, I just want to thank you, and especially those that are in elected positions. And I know you're doing what you can to help our citizens, and we very much appreciate that as well. And while things do feel a little clunky at times because we're having to leverage tools that we don't normally use, but the key thing about Georgia is that we're going to figure out a way to get it done. And so I'm very appreciative of the fact that I get a chance to be on a team, represent a team that is doing that. So thanks for being here this morning, and look forward to covering the material. And I think we're working on a way to get better at this, because we know that with so many moving parts and different devices, trying to get us all on the same page, tough thing to do, but I appreciate everybody working and supporting and helping. And today, and like any other day, being patient. So thank you very much. Nia has sent out documents prior to this meeting. So you should have the agenda and minutes, and so that we can vote on this morning. So if there's, okay, if I get a motion for someone to approve the meeting agenda.
Motion, Kelly Brownlow.
Second.
Teresa Fisher.
Okay, Nia, did you get that?
I did.
Okay. Yeah, any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Like sign. All right, motion carries. Thank you. I'm going to try to be patient with the system responses. So the next item that we have is the minutes from our last meeting, which were also sent out ahead of time. So do we have a motion to approve?
Motion, Randy.
Motion.
Ooh, I'm sorry, can you repeat your name? Chris Bison.
Yes.
Thank you.
We have a second?
Tom Cook, the second.
All right, thanks. All right, any questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, like sign? Motion carries. Thank you very much. So next up on the agenda, we're moving to our committee reports. And we'll start first with the Adult and Dislocated Worker Committee. And I'll turn the floor over to Karen Vieira.
Thank you, Wendell. Good morning, everyone. So we had a committee meeting on August 5th at 2:30 in the afternoon. We did not have any action items to vote on or approve, but we did have some updates in the area. Brittany Bolt shared with us the number of layoffs that were reported through the warm notice system. She shared some updates that the companies that applied recently, because those temporary layoffs had turned into permanent, so they are still getting the warn notices coming into the state. There is a opportunity for each of the workforces are going to be connecting with their industry partners to learn more about the emerging workforce needs, trends, and how the state will be able to respond and support individuals that are returning to the workforce and what those needs might be. And Brittany, I don't know if you have more to share now, or we'll go through this as we go through the meeting. All right, I'm not hearing additional comments from Brittany, so I'll go on to talk a little bit about the WorkSource Macon Bibb and WorkSource Middle Georgia local area highlight. Daryl Stilling joined us. Tiffany Andrews joined us from Macon Bibb, and Daryl is from the Middle Georgia area. Tiffany was losing her voice and not feeling at top of her game. So I really thank Daryl for helping. They're wonderful partners. They've been working together across the area. They serve 11 county regions, and they have been very creative and resourceful in moving much of the material to online to help the folks responding online. And they were out for a couple of weeks staying home, but they realized that the impact that they have in the community is by being in the office. So they've been very creative in finding ways to bring people in, but to manage the social distancing and ensuring safety. They've also, some of the team members have gone out to meet people either at curbside or outside meetings. So they're finding a way to make it work. They spent a lot of time with converting to PDFs or converting to online applications, their materials. And I really was impressed because I think they implemented a best practice that maybe we could use in other areas as well, because they combined all of their resources. So if anyone goes into any one of the offices, the 11 county regions, and they walk in for service, they can receive assistance. It doesn't matter where they are. And where previously they had to say, oh no, you're served through this particular workforce, you need to go there. They have partnered together, Tiffany and Daryl, and created a unified approach to going into any one of the 11 locations. They're going to get help. So I really thought that was a best practice, and I wanted to shout out to them. We also opened the meeting thanking everyone that joined the board, that was on the call, and also our workforce team for being resourceful. And just like this meeting, it's a new normal. So we're all having to flex and work in a different way. So definitely wanted to give a shout out to the workforce team members and to our board for showing up. We did have quorum. Everyone was in attendance. So, or many people, most of the folks were in attendance. We did have another WorkSource update from Three Rivers, and Stephanie Glenn joined us. Stephanie was telling us about what they were going through, some of the challenges. They've been onboarding new staff to meet the needs of their community. So if you can imagine, this is not an easy process to hire someone in the middle of this, onboard them, and bring them up to speed. Their area also passed some emergency policies to support, as did the other areas, some Chromebook to allow those people with their virtual learning. And they did get positive testimonials about the response to the pandemic, as did the other two areas. So I wanted to thank them for their updates. And if there's no questions, Wendell, I'll turn this back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Karen, thank you very much for the update. Are there any questions for Karen or the Adult Dislocated Worker Committee? Okay, well, and really, Karen, I think the highlighting of what the local areas are doing, I know we'll hear more information about what folks are doing across the system, but we're very appreciative of the innovation, the figuring out ways to serve, and that's so important. And it's really nice to see it here. We really thank everybody for the hard work in that space. These unprecedented times, unique conditions, circumstances, and our folks are still figuring out how to serve and help, and that's tremendous. So thank you, and thank you for highlighting.
Yeah, I think the team, I think these best practices are something we really should highlight as we're going forward. So I thank the team for bringing their ideas, their creativity, and their heart to the meeting and sharing with all of us. So thank you.
Excellent. Thanks again, Karen. All right. we'll move on to the next item, the Youth Committee. Commissioner Andrews, turn forward to you. You're still on mute, I believe. Okay, there you go.
Okay, thank you. We had a quorum on Tuesday, August the 4th, and so we did have our meeting. We have no action items to bring to you today, but during our meeting, we did have a spotlight from the Atlanta Regional Commission. And Director Rob LeBeau and Marsherie O'Connor shared highlights regarding how COVID has impacted their programs and their service delivery. So like many local areas, their most significant impact has been limited face-to-face services, such as recruitment and enrollment, transportation, in-person instruction and curriculum and work experience. So they've shifted their delivery model to a hybrid, as most public service workers have done, including virtual and some in-person services. They're limited group sessions with social distance. We are their youth so that they can prepare for the GED. In addition to the online training services, the Atlanta Regional Commission is working with community partners to provide some food and utility assistance and mental wellness, life coaching, financial literacy, internet services, whatever they feel are the pressing needs at that moment and in this moment in which we're living. And they are also relying heavily on social media platforms to keep the youth engaged. So among the many challenges, they're rising to the occasion and finding ways in which they can meet the needs of those they serve. We also heard from OWD Youth Service Lead Ben Lanier. He provided us an update on the TABE assessment. It's been very difficult due to social distancing for a lot of our local workforce development areas to provide the TABE. And so OWD has been working with the organization that oversees TABE, and they're planning to purchase the license in bulk and disperse that to the local workforce development areas based on the need. So those were two updates. Again, the staff and the local areas are rising to the occasion. They're doing whatever it takes to meet the needs of individuals who are struggling during this time. So I certainly appreciate the work of the staff and the work of everyone on the committee to offer ideas and provide input into the process. So we have no action items. So Mr. Chairman, I turn the meeting back to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any questions for Commissioner Andrews and the Youth Committee? Well, again, thank you very much for highlighting the things that are going on, taking place within this space. And the fact is, with whatever we have, whatever resources we have, we're trying to figure out a way to serve. And again, another obvious demonstration of how folks are working together here in the future. Thanks, Commissioner. We'll move on to the Performance and Accountability Committee. And I believe Brittany Singer is going to handle this for us today.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The Performance and Accountability Committee met on August 4th. We did have a quorum. However, similar to the other committees, we did not have any action items. But you'll see from the agenda that the two topics we discussed are actually presentations for today. So I'll go ahead and start talking about the PY19 monitoring. So I have a couple brief updates about the upcoming season, but before we get to that, I wanted to back up a little bit and address a question that Dr. Andrews posed at the last board meeting about monitoring. So you'll see here the next couple slides are from that PY18 monitoring report that we presented to you all. I'm putting those up here just to jog your memory. But Dr. Andrews asked about when we see repeat findings either within the same area or with across multiple areas and sort of how we handle that. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So the titles that you'll see on these slides here, this one's the finance slide. The next two will be programs and compliance needs. Just look through those slowly. So the titles that you see here are the category of finding, and I just wanted to point out the difference between the testing area and our finding conditions. So the way we've crafted these graphs really just give you the general area that we're testing. So it makes it look like there are more repeat findings. However, the finding conditions that fall under those categories are much more specific. So again, this is just the general area. If you can go 2 more. Perfect. So here's some examples of testing area versus the finding condition. So we'll see a lot of findings on the finance side for contracting, but within that you could have a finding for failure to execute their memorandum of understanding. Maybe another contract has a missing profit provision, or they didn't identify their subrecipient. So all of those can be different findings. I'll just touch on the programmatic administration one. That one you can have a wide variety of finding conditions. But again, the main testing area is just more general. So an area could be lacking a policy, it could be missing documentation from a case file, and a host of other things. Thank you. So how often do repeat findings occur was the crux of Dr. Andrews' question, and I appreciate her bringing this up. So I wanted to address the 2 different types of repeat findings. So there could be findings within the same area multiple years in a row. However, this is pretty, you're fine. This is pretty infrequent. I went back and looked at all of our reports for the last 3 years, and we've only had 1 area that had the same finding 2 years in a row. And just to sort of give you an idea of what that was, it was about their work experience program. We identified sort of a minor issue with it 1 year, had them correct it. However, the next year when we came back, we noticed that the issue was happening again, and what we realized was that it was a fundamental issue with their program design. So we were able to tailor that corrective action. They had some staff changes, somehow reverted back to using the wrong template, which is where the issue stemmed from. So we were able to dig in a little deeper and address the root cause and not just the symptom, which is what we had identified that first year. So for that area, we're on track now. Now, there may be, if you could advance to the next one here. PowerPoint's got a mind of its own today. There may be case file findings that are technically the same 2 years in a row. However, I just wanted to point out, we don't automatically consider those to be repeat findings. If it's just 1 or 2 files within a testing year, mainly because we select a different set of samples each year, and it's very possible that we found the 1 or 2 files that this issue occurred in. So we'll have them correct that issue. And depending on what the issue is, it may not warrant a full audit of all of their case files, mainly because with hundreds of participants either active or in follow-up, local areas don't necessarily have the bandwidth to do that full examination. However, when mistakes are the result of maybe a faulty process, then we would obviously audit more files. And that's usually pretty evident in the sample selection. If we find a certain number or higher of this issue, we say, hey, this is something that's happening across the system. So again, if it's a serious enough issue or if there are enough files, so if it's a disallowed cost, or obviously if it involves fraud, then we would diagnose that as a bigger issue and do a much bigger audit of their files for that particular issue. I'll address the, across multiple areas, we see the same finding, and that is a little bit more common. That can be the result of increased scrutiny on a particular testing area. So, maybe we wrote a new policy that year, and we just want to make sure that that's being adhered to. So you'll see it in that case. And then sometimes it can result as a lack of guidance. So, we'll see an issue across multiple areas and realize, oh, there's a disconnect between this issue in theory and how it's happening on the ground. And so we will address that, and I'll cover how we handle that in just a second. So in terms of dealing with repeat findings, there are 3 types of things that we can do. We can offer a WorkSource Academy training session. So this is going to be, those general sessions that are available to everyone at our annual academy, or they are presentations that we host as webinars and keep on our website. So you'll see here some examples of issues that we identified across multiple areas. So we developed a training to address that. Subrecipient monitoring, document management is a big one that we see, equal opportunity policies, and so on. The second option that we could have to address these repeat findings would be either issuing further guidance or policy. So the examples I put up here, you'll remember earlier this year, we approved we wrote and the board approved the confidentiality and security policy. There were just some issues that we were noticing in local areas that we realized our policy was not as clear and concise as we wanted it to be. So we updated that policy. Another finding that we've been seeing was local board issues. So we created a resource guide, which is more of a best practices guide. It's got a bunch of frequently asked questions. It's a living document. We add to it as issues come up or as they're asked of us by the local areas. And then the third and final option that we would use to address repeat findings is kind of tailoring a training to that local area specific issue. So a couple that we have offered in the past are trainings specific to their intake and eligibility processes and what required documentation is needed there. We've also done one on local board requirements. We had an area that was having a lot of turnover. Their CLIO essentially appointed a whole new board. We thought now's a good time to go in and kind of address these issues. So those are the ways that we handle repeat findings. And again, it's not something we see super often, but we do see it. We will make sure that we address it and offer the training to fully resolve those issues and not see them again. And the last piece that I wanted to touch on is in regard to the upcoming monitoring season. So PY19 reviews. We would normally start this process in the middle of August. Oops, sorry, you can miss this one. We would normally start this in August. However, no surprise to anyone, COVID-19 has also affected this process for us. So we have delayed it by about a month. Our first monitoring week will be September 14th. We will still be able to wrap up our monitoring in March of 2021, which is usually when the season ends. So we're on schedule with that. The other major change here is that we are going to be moving to a virtual monitoring. And I want to stress that we are only planning to do this for PY19. We're hopeful that we can return to some sort of on-site visit for the PY20 monitoring season, but obviously we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And our main goal with changing this now is that we want to make sure we have a uniform review across all local areas. And given the uncertainty that has become our new normal these days, we think it's best to adapt our process now instead of having to swap halfway through. And I will say that this is, honestly, I anticipate it will be a fairly seamless transition with the work that we've done in the past years to move case files to, the electronic system, as well as the shortened on-site visit that we did last year. We've kind of been moving closer and closer to this, so we're confident that the rollout will go well. So the main changes that we'll see here with moving to a virtual monitoring is that our entrance and exit meetings, which happen on Monday and Friday, obviously, of the monitoring week, as well as our staff interviews, will be conducted via video conference. All of our local areas should have access to that technology. We've requested for them to go ahead and let us know if it's going to be an issue. Obviously, we can't anticipate all of the hiccups, but we'll work through that as we run into issues. And then the other change that we'll be seeing here is the document submission will be collected via email, which is fairly normal for us. However, there are some documents, mainly the financial samples, that are either too large for email or that contain sensitive information. So, banking and routing numbers. But TCSG is actually transitioning our data storage platform. So we will be able to instead send them a secure link. They can upload those files, which should handle that issue for us. And we don't see that that'll be a problem moving forward. So again, I think we're well positioned to have a smooth rollout. Obviously, we'll be adjusting and tweaking the process as needed. Again, uncertainty is the new normal these days. So we'll just be handling that as we come across it. The other thing I wanted to let you guys know about is obviously case files and participant documents. Those are always transmitted via our WorkSource portal, which is a secure portal. So none of that information will be transmitted via email. And we'll just keep with our normal process for case files. So that's our update on PY19 monitoring. Are there any questions?
Brittany, this is Susan. Thank you
I
so
don't hear
much
any.
for the information. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for asking that question. I think that was a good point to clarify. And I think for our next monitoring report, we may break out those graphs differently so we can see more of a detailed view of what the findings are, instead of only addressing those general testing areas. So I think that was a great point, and I thank you for bringing that up. If there aren't any other questions, the other update that we had on the Performance and Accountability Committee was given by Stephen Wilson about our performance negotiations. So I'll turn it over to him to give the remainder of our committee update.
Thank you, Brittany, and good morning, everybody. I just want to give a brief update on the performance negotiations that we went under since our last meeting. So if y'all don't know, every 2 years, we're required to negotiate with ETA, USDOL's ETA, our performance measures that we at the state level are graded on, our success or failure is measured by. We submit those via our state plan, and if ETA agrees with our proposed goals, there's no negotiations needed. But to our surprise, they did not accept our goals. So we did have to do a negotiation a couple months ago. You go to the next slide. Yeah. So at the state level, ETA, if they disagree with our goals, it's based on a few factors. They compare us to our peer states in the region, so North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida. I think that's all of them. And look at our performance historically versus our peers. They also have what they call a statistical adjustment model, where they take our past performance, include any kind of customer characteristics that we have. If we're serving a lot of difficult to serve folks, that'll take some effect in the model, as well as economic conditions of the state. And they feed all that information into the model and develop a goal that they set for us based on those parameters. The floor for our goals is basically the GEPR goals, which is basically every federal program has a set of goals that this act puts in place. So that's kind of the floor. ETA doesn't really let us go below that threshold. And then they also are looking for us to have continuous improvement. Go to the next slide, Nia. So the measures that we negotiated were the employment rate in the second quarter after exit. So the percentage of our participants who, after they exited, in that second quarter after they exit, did they have a job? And we look again in the fourth quarter and get our employment rate in the fourth quarter after exit. And then of those folks who were employed in that second quarter after exit, what were the median earnings of that cohort? And then for any of our participants who were enrolled in education or training during their participation, we look at the percent of those folks who earned a credential. And then new for this round, this PY 2021 round of negotiations, was the measurable skills gains. And this measures the folks who were also enrolled in education or training during that participation in that training or in education activity. Did they progress a skill level? So if they were a full-time student, did they go from one semester to the next successfully? If they took a CDL class, did they get that CDL license successfully? Same thing with CNA, if they passed that test, become a certified nursing aide. Other examples, if they're in an apprenticeship, did they successfully progress from 1 year to the next of that apprenticeship? So that's a measurable skills gain, and that was new for this year. And you'll see it's one of our lower goals because it's a new measure and it's the first time we negotiated those rates. Go to the next one. So this was the outcome of our negotiation process. It was an interesting process. It actually took place over 2 days because the first day when we entered the negotiation with ETA, they did not take into account any of the effects of the pandemic. So they looked at their statistical adjustment model goals, which are based on past performance and the economic conditions of the prior program year, which the economic conditions of that program year were fantastic. So, for example, their adult Q2 rate that they initially set for us was 84%, when we proposed something closer to 74%. So we were pretty far apart, and that first day of negotiations, we stalled after about an hour and a half of no real progress. But it was rescheduled a couple days later, and we made a little more inroads. If you go to the next slide, Nia, I'll show kind of comparison. So our PY18-19 goals are the first two columns for each of those measures, and then the 2021 goals, which we just negotiated, are the third and fourth columns. So you'll see we gave a little bit on most of these measures, but a lot less than what ETA was asking us to do. So we're pretty happy with the results. The one big thing you may notice is the adult dislocated worker credential rates. Back in 18-19, that was a new measure that we didn't really have a baseline for. And so when we initially negotiated those goals, they were pretty low because we didn't really know, what to suggest. And ETA gave us that latitude. Well, we got the results in 18 and 19, and our credential attainment rates were mostly in the high 70s for adult and dislocated workers. And so even with that large adjustment in our goal to the 60% range, mid 60s for dislocated workers, we'll still comfortably meet those goals if everything continues as it has in 18 and 19 into 20 and 21. So like I said, overall, considering where ETA started us during this process, we're pretty happy with where we ended up. And then now that we finished up with the feds negotiating the state goals, we had to turn around and negotiate with all 19 local areas for their individual regional goals. Nia, if you want to go to the next slide. It was a very similar process. They proposed rates to us. They were mostly pretty reasonable in their proposed goals. So we were able to accept a good bit, but we did have negotiations with all 19 areas for some of the measures. We had to have a little bit of a discussion depending on where they were at and where we thought they would be. But like I said, we were a lot more graceful with them than ETA was with us. But we did the same process. We looked at past performance, any kind of difficult to serve populations that they are serving, and also the economic conditions. And the pandemic has hit each of our areas differently. It has impacted all of our areas, but not every area in the same manner. So we took all of that into account. But like I said, it's relatively painless process at the local area, and I would hope that they would agree. Any of the locals on the call right now, if they want to chime in, they can. But I think it was a very successful process with our local areas, and we're very happy with where we ended up. The locals typically go and go well past their goals anyway, and exceed their goals anyway. But if just a little over the majority of those areas meet their goals that we established with them, and the state will very easily meet its goals. So we negotiated the process, I think, to where all parties are in a good spot. And like I said, if most areas hit their goals, then the state will be well above their thresholds needed. So with that, I'll open up to any questions or. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure what's.
Thank you, Stephen. And Brittany, any questions for Brittany or Stephen before we move to the next committee? All right, I just wanted to say thank you for your work on areas. Obviously, as y'all heard, we've made adjustments based upon the COVID-19, and rightly so. And I appreciate everybody adjusting and working. And I also want to just especially thank the local areas because what they do in the local areas ultimately is what we do at the state level. And I'm very proud of the coordination and the work going on within OWD and those local shops. And again, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a wonderful job, and we appreciate it. So let's move on to our next committee, which is the Financial Oversight Committee. And I'll turn this over to former Mayor Barnett. Ames, floor is yours, sir.
Try to hit the highlights. Hope I can get it where people kind of understand what's going on the dollars. As y'all may know, a reminder that the revenues we get are based on how good the state economy is doing. So our numbers for 2020 were based on last year's unemployment numbers, which was, record low unemployment. So we got a cut in funds. And now with what's going on now, we need more money than we've had. So we've been challenged with budget cuts because of a good economy now. There's more needs than we had, and so increased revenue. So it's kind of a double storm that hit us. But we did apply for emergency grant of $12 million. We were awarded $12 million of emergency money. Also applied for an allotment of $25 million. Hadn't received notice of that, but to my understanding, if we spend 70% of the grant funding within the first year, we got an ability for the next 25 is the way I understand it. The fiscal year 20 funding is youth funding and dislocated worker funding has been distributed. If you've been on the board a while, there was a time period where local areas did not spend money. So we would recapture that money and put it out to local areas that may need more youth funds, may take it from area and use it to get the youth served from different areas of the state. We did not do any recapture this year because we felt like those local areas would need those funds coming up with what's going on. So there was no recapture done this year. And I think we're approving the budget but the budget has been approved, or we've worked on the budget for that. And then a summary of it is we're challenged with a cut. The financial part is we're challenged with a cut budget. We do expect the unemployment rate to be around 2008, 2009 numbers in amount of participants we're going to serve. Unemployed claims are kind of skewed because we don't know who is going to get unemployed after PPP cuts off. And I think financial wise, they're looking at it as there new ways of training to make sure we're training for what the new economy is going to be. Because as the e-commerce shapes up, commercial space goes down, as if we spend these dollars effectively and efficiently to get as many Georgians as we've trained as possible. And I think that's what we're working on. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have to report, and I'll open the floor up. If y'all got any questions, ask me. And if you ask me a question, we'll pass it on to those ladies in that office that know everything.
Ames, as usual, I appreciate you, sir. Any questions for Ames Finance Committee? Great updates.
Mr. Chairman, I am going to step off if it's okay. We got a training class going on next door in our office that I got to step back into if that's okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the next item, the executive committee. And Kristen, I guess I turn over to Brittany first. This is to walk through the process of what we approved items, and we'll take us to the board level. So I'll just turn over to Kristen, you or Brittany, whoever's going to speak first.
Great, we'll do Brittany Bullock first. Brittany,
Okay.
Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as the chairman said, this rapid response policy that I have for you today was presented and approved by the executive committee on June 25th. This policy, it's going to increase the state's rapid response set aside from 10% to 25%. This set aside comes from the state's total allocation of dislocated worker dollars. In PY19, we saw four times the number of layoff events that we normally see in a typical year. We also saw record high unemployment, as all of you all are familiar with. So while our state is slowly working towards a recovery, we're still seeing a lot of rapid response activity. So we're looking to make this increase to just ensure that we are able to meet the needs of Georgia businesses and their employees. And so I'm just bringing this policy before the board today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. There's no questions. Kristen, can we vote on both of these at the same time or separately?
Yes, sir. If you want to, I can move on to the budget. And Nia, if you'll just go to the next slide. Okay. So this is a little difficult to see, but if you, it was in the packet that Nia sent out on Friday. So if you want to take a better look, I would recommend going to that PDF because this is a little.
I love Wendell.
Yeah, this is a little much. So this budget, like the rapid response policy that Brittany talked about, was actually approved just because of timing issues by the executive committee a few weeks ago. So we are bringing it for the before the full board to just affirm. This budget was definitely cut from what you would see last year. We wanted to, obviously the state received less funding in general. However, our operation budget hardly ever gets to the full amount of funding because we try to make the majority of our funds actually available to our local areas for use. And so while we didn't necessarily need to cut operationally, again, we wanted to be able to make as much of our funding as we could available to local areas who are actually serving participants. So to do that, we went through a series of cuts. Some of those cuts were easy, things like travel, things like training. There's going to be a lot less of those opportunities this year anyway. So it made sense to cut a lot of those line items pretty significantly. When Brittany talked about moving the monitoring process to a completely online monitoring process, obviously that helps with travel significantly. We had to cancel our typical conference that's in October. That's a significant amount of the training budget. We still plan to offer a good amount of training virtually, but not being there in person does decrease cost. And so we were able to see some cost savings there. One of the other things that can be a larger line item is the state board meetings when we do those in person. So being able to move that to a virtual platform, at least for the next two, and then we'll look at what the new year brings in terms of us being able to meet in person. That decreases costs as well. Some of the costs that you'll still see there that are pretty constant is the cost for rent, utilities, cell phones, things like that. The salary is in the first part. Some of the larger line items, if you look down towards that are going to remain pretty constant from year to year. If you go to the columns that just is class 312 is what that lists out at. A lot of those are contracts that we keep at the state level, but they support all of our local areas. So I believe the biggest line item in that group is what's called Geo Solutions. That's the statewide case management system that all of our participants are entered into and holds all of that information. So we have that contract on behalf of local areas. Our EMSI contract, Burning Glass, some of the data sharing and things like that we do with GDOL and pay for. Again, we pay that at the state level, but it's paid on behalf of all of the local areas. And then as you go down, we're still doing a little bit of retooling for the state's branding effort. There's just one or two physical locations around the state that we're still kind of doing some of those signs for. But as you see, that this has gone down significantly. We're almost done there. And then our biggest line item, of course, right over $9 million is our contract with the Georgia Department of Labor to do the rapid response services for the state. That kind of goes hand in hand with the policy that Brittany Bullock talked about right before this and having to increase our set aside there so that we are able to service the companies and individuals who are caught up in current COVID layoffs. So I'll keep it short because we're running a little bit behind time, but does anyone have any questions about budgetary items? Okay, Nia, could you go to the next slide? Chairman Barnett went off, but he asked me a question during the finance committee that I wanted to, I just wanted to address with everyone, just so you guys could get a bigger picture. When we're saying that we have less money and we're afraid of, larger turnout and turnout that kind of looks like recession level turnout, he wanted to see, he wanted a visual way to represent that. And so Stephen Wilson put this graph together for everyone. This is, this graph represents the last 10 years worth of funding and then also participant counts. So the blue bars show you funding, the orange line shows you, or excuse me, that's the opposite. The blue bars show you participant levels, the orange line shows you funding. So our year within the recession where we saw the highest number of enrollments was not 2008, 2009, it was actually 2010, where we had the enrollments of about 31,000. That funding level was about 95 million. So currently this year we already have, now keep in mind we're in August, so we're only 2 months into the current program year. We already have 13,000 enrollees. And our funding is down to 78 million. So the funding at the year when we had 30,000 enrollees was 95.6 million. So that just kind of shows, again, I don't want to make this a doom and gloom scenario. It was a very interesting year where, the economy, there was no lead up to what happened with COVID. We had one of the best economic years that turned into one of the worst economic years. With what we saw with the recession, there was a little bit more of a lead up. So you had 2008, 2009 that had bad economic indicators before we saw all the participants in 2010. Unfortunately, with the current climate, that's just not what happened with us. So what we're having to do this year is we're just having to make it through. We've got to do more with less. We've got to make smart decisions with money. However, if current economic indicators stay with where they are, our allocations will pick up for the next program year. So while this is bad, if it happens like it's happened every year since 2010, it will only be this bad in terms of funding for 1 year before it picks back up next year. So I just wanted you guys to see this in terms of the graph. I'll share it with Chairman Barnett offline. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. This is just, again, what we're going to have to deal with for the next few months, but it will get better. Mr. Chairman?
Okay. Thank you, Brittany, Kristen. So we're bringing this before the board. The executive committee's already voted on these items. And so at this point, if there are no questions, I need to get a motion from the floor. Kristen, I believe that's correct.
Yes, sir. A motion in a second to reaffirm the votes by the executive committee.
Mr. Chairman, this is Yarborough. I vote to approve the motion.
All right. Thank you. We have a second?
Mr. Chairman, this is Gerald Mitchell. I second.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed, like sign. All right, motion carries. Again, thank you, Brittany and Kristen, for going over the information. And I'll just really commend everyone, because this is obviously this is a very tough time right now. Not only are we dealing with this right now with the state board, but most companies, businesses are dealing with a lot of the same challenges. Having to make hard decisions and do the best they can with what they have. And so this is definitely a hard time. And while the funds are low and the need is great, which seems to be always the case, we see here that we're doing the best we can, and that's all we can ask. But we do appreciate everybody supporting each other, and the key thing is we'll get through this together, and then ultimately we hope to have more funds to help us in the future. But right now, I'm very thankful that we are doing the best we can, and folks are working together, supporting each other. So thanks again for the updates. Next up, we have rapid response. Brittany, is that back to you?
Yes, that's right. Would you like me to go ahead?
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Brittany, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you. So today I'm going to kind of set the scene of what has happened. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today I'm going to set the scene just what has happened in the last few months for the workforce system as a whole. As we've kind of talked a little bit at the front end of this meeting, we do contract our rapid response services to the Georgia Department of Labor. And essentially what that model looks like is when a company is going to lay off 50 or more individuals, they are required to submit what's called a WARN notice to the state. Just letting us know when the layoff is going to occur, how many employees are going to be impacted, and then we can kind of go work with that business to meet with the employees to kind of lay the ground of what resources are available to them during that separation. So they go over the unemployment benefits process, what would happen to their health care, guide them towards our workforce one-stop areas where they can receive retraining or reskilling if that's necessary. Like I said, they are required to submit a WARN notice if it's 50 or more, but there's no law enforcement behind this. And so it's our best guess of what the employment or the unemployment situation, the layoffs in the state look like. But just kind of keep that in mind that we don't always get a WARN notice from companies that are laying off. Also, even though some may choose not to publish a WARN notice, we do offer these rapid response services to any company that requests it. So just to give you some numbers here, in PY18, so that's going to be June 1st, 2018 to July 1, 2018 to June 30th, 2019, we saw about 198 notices. This past year, we saw 882 notices. That's 4 times the typical amount we receive. Just in March to May alone, we saw 626 notices. So you'll see on the chart there, we actually had a dip right before March. As we all know, we were in one of the best economic years that we've seen in a long time. But quickly into March, we saw the pandemic hit. And then into April and May, those kind of stay-at-home orders issued by our governor to keep us all safe at home. But unfortunately, that caused a lot of businesses to close down and for us to see quite a few WARN notices. A lot of these were partial WARN notices, some temporary situations. There was a lot of expectations that we would go back to work immediately. I mean, even with TCSG OWD, I think we shut down March 14th. We thought we were going to be back April 1st, and then that turned into April 15th, and then we didn't return to the office until June 15th. So I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing that in your own companies. So you do see a dramatic decrease right before June, and then we start to see a little bit of an increase, and I'll talk a little bit why we think that we're seeing kind of a new wave of WARN notices being captured at the state level. Next slide. So again, just to kind of give you some context, while these numbers are great, it's possible that these are grossly undercounted because it is required, but again, there's no law enforcement that is ensuring that these companies who are laying off individuals are reporting. Also, if a company closes their doors, there's really no way to capture that layoff if we hear afterwards and the employees are kind of dispersed. Another piece of that is that a lot of these companies thought they were going to bring their employees right back. And so that kind of goes into why we're seeing a little bit of a new wave of notices. So they're not required to report if their layoff is not going to last longer than 6 months. Well, now they're realizing their layoffs are going to last longer than 6 months. And so they're having to report those in a WARN notice now. Also, if they reported and now they are realizing they need to extend those temporary layoffs, they're submitting new WARN notices. And then unfortunately, we are just seeing some permanent layoffs and then also businesses closing their doors. So to give you an idea of what the sectors and industries impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, what that looks like, in 2008, excuse me, we saw very targeted sectors and industries affected by the recession. So it was easy to work with, well, I shouldn't say easy, but a little bit easier to work with participants who had transferable skills to say, okay, this industry is not looking so great right now. You have transferable skills that would make you successful here. And our career counselors could kind of work through that. Here we're seeing all sectors and industries have been impacted very quickly, whereas before there was a lead up, this was very quick in March, April, and June and May. And so that kind of hampers our ability to transition employees from one sector to another. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. A few sectors are benefiting and expanding, and that's in logistics and warehousing. We're moving more goods and products than ever before, especially in the residential area. But there are some that are suffering. Hospitality by far is the largest impacted, and I'll show you guys some numbers around that. Of course, that brick and mortar retail and food industry, folks are staying at home. They're not going out to the stores. They're not going to the restaurants. And so we saw major layoffs and separations there. And while we hear a lot about the need for healthcare workers and our appreciation of healthcare workers right now, a lot of that is to meet the needs of the COVID crisis. And to ensure that we have the capacity to meet the needs of the crisis, a lot of things like elective medical procedures were held back on. And so we have seen a little bit of suffering in the healthcare industry in that aspect. So it's interesting that you look at healthcare as a whole and it's in demand, but if you start to kind of silo down the different pieces of the medical industry, how some are affected greater than others. So right now, it's really just essential for our career counselors to help recognize the transferable skills and kind of plug our participants into areas of great growth. We have a lot of data on just the raw numbers of which companies are laying off and the unemployment claims by individuals in the industries that they work in. But we're still kind of in a holding phase of really understanding where businesses are looking to go forward. And so things like Burning Glass, that data that pulls from job postings, we're just now starting to see job postings ramp back up. And so we don't have a great picture where we're going, but that's why it's so important for us. And I think Karen mentioned this in my previous update, that our sector partnership leaders are really working closely with their industry partners to hear directly from them what's going on the ground and how can the workforce system best prepare to serve individuals to get back to work. Next slide. Thank you. So here, this is the total number of unemployment claims broken down by industry. You'll see that the accommodation and food services surpass all industries a great amount, almost 800,000 initial claim notices from March to July. We see other industries, retail, trade, manufacturing. They're also seeing a large number of layoffs in manufacturing. Like I said, goods and transportation are seeing an increase, but in terms of manufacturing and individuals staying close to one another on a line, we saw a lot of outbreaks and shutdowns because of that. So that's kind of reflected in those numbers. And then also the healthcare and social assistance. And I wanted to show you all just the vast number of the accommodation and food services workers that have given an initial claim. But it kind of skews the data here. So we see transportation warehousing looks kind of low here, but it represents about 100,000 jobs. So just keep that in mind while looking at this chart. Okay, next one. Awesome. And then this is kind of just a chronological dip in the impacts of those unemployment claims. And I guess another interesting point here to remind you all of is that usually when we get a UI claim, it represents a permanent layoff. A lot of these were temporary layoffs. And so while we could kind of try to compare them to months prior, it would kind of be like comparing apples to oranges because the nature of the UI claims are different. Okay, next one. And then this is just the number of our total UI claims by month. You see in March, we had about 155,000 claims. But really, I would say that we didn't see the impacts of COVID until those last 2 weeks of March. Then we see a spike in April and in May. Then we're starting to trend downwards, but still we're about 300,000 more UI claims than we were in March. And think about what it may have been in February or January. So while we're starting to come down and maybe even plateau, our numbers are still very high. And that's why we are seeing such a great need in it for rapid response services, for dislocated worker services. We're going to present soon on some of the federal response we've seen there. But again, just wanted to set the scene of what we're looking at right now. And then this is a breakdown by region of those initial claims. Of course, we see that the Atlanta regional area, Atlanta, Fulton County, DeKalb, Cobb are some of our hardest hit industry or areas. Of course, they have the largest populations. But if we look at an area like Northwest Georgia or Georgia Mountains, that's more rural, they have significant numbers as well. And even somewhere like if you look at Lower Chat, Area 14, which is near Columbus, seeing 25,000 jobs lost in the month of April is pretty significant. We can go to the next one. So in terms of seeking reemployment services, what are employees doing right now? Initially, employers weren't asking for these reemployment services to be provided to their employees because they truly believed that they were going to turn around and bring back those employees right away. So we were seeing much fewer job postings in March and June. Go ahead and click, yeah. But now that we're seeing that layoffs are becoming permanent, individuals are maybe choosing not to go back to work once they're recalled. That is a trend that we're seeing and a reason why those numbers are staying high. And that's a lot from safety concerns of going back to work, but then also the unemployment benefits that actually have just expired. So we'll see where that trend goes now. That allowed folks to stay in the safety of their home and kind of have that cushion. And so everything's kind of in flux. It seems like we've been trying to hit a moving target since March, but we're just keeping our eyes and ears open to what all is happening. But we are seeing an increase in the job postings right now because businesses are starting to adjust to what this new normal looks like. Also, if they decided to recall or were able to recall employees and they chose not to return, then now they're looking to kind of refill those positions that have been vacated. And so for retraining services on the participant end, initially we weren't seeing a dramatic increase, at least in our workforce areas, because again, they believed that these layoffs were temporary. Something that our partners at GUL has shared is that, they were even encouraged to look into the retraining option because the extension of the UI benefits would provide them with some additional financial support while they look to retrain. But some of the challenges there were just that, occupational training opportunities were challenged because of the stay-at-home orders, or it was towards the end of the semester. And then and that's speaking about, the normal classroom training that we see our participants participate in. And then things like on-the-job training became a challenge because of the stay-at-home order, and also just because temporary closures of businesses. And now employees are starting to begin to think about a retraining option as, if you're in the hospitality industry, it's not picking up as quickly as you would expect. People are still staying home, they're not traveling. So now is the time to kind of think about reskilling and retraining in order to be more competitive in our new workforce. There's been some concerns that without the extension of UI, that people don't have that cushion in order to go back to school, but we'll be presenting on this in a few moments. We have received a dislocated worker grant or national dislocated worker grant from USDOL, and this may provide individuals with the support that they need to look at the retraining option. So how are we transitioning? Dislocated workers, we're starting to encourage them to look at new skills, to obtain new credentials that really meet the needs of the emerging workforce. And like I said, we're having to work closely with our business partners to kind of get an understanding of what that actually will look like. But with that, there is going to be increased opportunities for on-the-job training and customized training. Workplaces are changing dramatically. So even if you were able to stay in your job, you may have to learn new skills to keep up with the pace. I know we've all experienced having to learn Webex, Zoom, whatever the platform may be. And so there are opportunities to upskill even those who are employed. And then also we're looking to explore just remote on-the-job training opportunities. And then for employers, I think it's important to know that they are adapting existing jobs, their business models and their processes. Our chair, Karen Vera, she shared that their organization is looking at their organizational chart and how they function on a day-to-day basis. And I think a lot of companies are experiencing that right now as we adjust to our new normal. And again, here are the increased opportunities for OJT and customized training. And then finally, the workforce system as a whole has really had to transition to more of an online platform. A lot of our business is done face-to-face. It's very relational. And so a lot of our, really the administrative paperwork has had to be uploaded so that individuals can receive services online. But then also kind of those personal touches, we're looking at how to build webinars for resume writing, for interview techniques, things of that nature. So that initial intake for administrative purposes, but also the services themselves, we're looking to transition online. And I think we're hearing a lot of great practices, just as Karen shared from Middle Georgia and from Three Rivers, that they are looking to transition and to work really hard to ensure that folks are able to get the services they need, even if they are at home. So with that, I think that kind of sets the scene of where we're at now, and then we'll present in a few moments on kind of where we're going with our dislocated worker grant, how we're going to try to meet some of these challenges.
Thank you.
No problem.
So looks like I'm getting feedback somewhere. Any questions for Brittany right now? And I know we're running a little bit on time, so the next presentation, if we can go ahead and move to that. Is that, I think it's what you're referring to, or no, it's later. It's the other one that we're going to be doing. Okay.
Chairman Dallas,
yes.
We're going to push the technical college response presentation to the November meeting. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we'll just go on to the dislocated worker grant presentation if that's okay with you.
Yes, it is. And unless I don't think I'm going to get any objections to that, so I think we're fine. So, well, if that's being the case, and we look forward to the next one with Assistant Commissioner Hornsby at our next meeting. Dislocated worker grant and WorkSource Georgia COVID-19 landing page presentation. Brittany, Jamie, and Shamika, the floor is yours.
Okay, awesome. So I think for the sake of time, Jamie had some really great information, just what we look like nationally in terms of unemployment and some of the trends we're seeing. But since we've kind of covered the Georgia specific data, we're going to jump into the meat of the dislocated worker grant. So Nia, you can kind of push through the slides. I think it begins with federal response to COVID-19. Perfect. Awesome. So in March, no one expected us to all be dealing with this pandemic in August, but the feds were pretty quick about responding to this crisis. I think the Office of Workforce Development, we all started working from home and remotely, and TCSG, the system office in general, I think about March 14th. And then we saw an announcement of the dislocated worker grants on March 18th. And so US DOL, the Employment and Training Administration, announced that there was going to be $100 million available to the states to respond to COVID-19. They expected the mass amounts of layoffs. I'm not sure that they expected them in the numbers that we ultimately saw, but they knew that we were going to need support. So they released some new guidance around dislocated worker grants, because typically these are used to support us in times of need of natural disasters. But this is a new type of natural disaster, a public health crisis. And so they put out new guidance of what we could support with the dislocated worker dollars, which I'll go into that a little bit. But in the first 15 days after the announcement, we submitted an initial application, just kind of outlining what we thought we could hit or serve in terms of employment and training and disaster work sites. And we got the response in the middle of April, and we received an initial award of $12 million. And so $12 million was, quite frankly, it was about half of what we requested. However, we were really proud to hear that we did receive the maximum amount of an award than any other state. And that was based on a severity score. They told us that it was measured against the number of COVID cases that we had in our state, our population, and the number of layoffs that we were experiencing. So while it was shy of our original ask, we did receive the maximum amount of funding that was available through the Dislocated Worker Grant. And so since then, we had to submit a full application, because that initial one was just kind of our best guess of what we thought was going to happen. And then we submitted our full application in June, and a lot has evolved since then. You know, in March and April, we thought of all of these work sites that would help with reopening the state, and then the state reopened before our full application was even submitted. So our local areas and our partners at the Georgia Department of Labor and the Georgia Department of Education have been really flexible in thinking outside of the box about how we could really serve the state with this grant money. So what can we do with the funding that we have received? The first thing is employment and training activities. So really the bread and butter of WIOA services that allow individuals to come to our programs and receive the individual training, the individual training accounts, the OJT, whatever it may be, to allow folks to get retrained and reskilled. This is a new piece of a DWG. Usually it's only the temporary work sites. And so this is a unique opportunity for us to kind of fill the gap in some of that funding shortage we're seeing in the dislocated worker dollars, that this dislocated worker grant, DW is the alphabet soup right now, to allow us to serve individuals. We also can use the funding to establish temporary employment sites for those who have been affected by the disaster. And so those have to fall into the areas of humanitarian assistance and then cleanup assistance. So some of the work sites that our local areas have proposed are the delivery of food for food assistance. And so we've seen quite an increase in the need for food assistance across the state. And so our local areas are able to work with local food banks, their departments of health services, all in order to kind of serve individuals. And then cleanup activities. So we have projects running in Middle Georgia, in Macon-Bibb, in Northeast Georgia, where we're able to hire individuals on a temporary basis, give them an employment opportunity. And this employment opportunity is to kind of sanitize public facilities prior to their reopening, so that we can kind of get the ball rolling on recovering our economy. And then who can participate in the activities? Dislocated workers, as they are defined in the Code of Federal Regulations. So while this is all about the response to COVID-19, we can serve just our regular dislocated workers, but also workers that are laid off as a direct result of the disaster. Something new in this wave of dislocated worker grants as well is our ability to serve self-employed individuals. They're able to document and kind of show that they are now unemployed or underemployed because of the disaster. So that's something new. And then also we're able to serve long-term unemployed individuals. And long-term unemployed is defined by BLS as 26 weeks. So the type of individuals we can serve has kind of been expanded for the purpose of this grant. So where are we now? So our full application was submitted in June, or right at the beginning of July, and we requested a total of $25 million. And that's going to represent about 1,000 temporary employment disaster sites, and then about 1,400 career and employment training opportunities. So a total of about 2,500 individuals will be able to serve if we receive the full applications request of $25 million. Our application is currently in the review and revision stage with the national office. And so we're just doing some back and forth negotiation with them and looking forward to our full award or our final notice of award. But our LWDAs and our partners have started to prioritize the disaster employment work sites. We have been given the green light to go ahead and enroll and kind of start the work with the blessing that the jobs that are active right now have kind of been pre-approved. Nothing is officially approved. That they told us that yesterday, but that the jobs that we have proposed are kind of in line with what we're looking to do in terms of allowable activities. So that is where we are at with the dislocated worker grant. Happy to answer any questions. And I know Shamika is going to talk about kind of our online presence and how we've responded.
Kristen, do you want us to keep going, or you want to stop here? How do you want to do it?
Well, Shamika, it sounds like we're getting a lot of feedback. I'm not sure why, but I think are you up next?
Yeah, but I think we are about 30 seconds from the cutoff. So I just want to know.
Shamika, if you can just promo the COVID site, just so our board members know where to send people if they come across people who have been affected.
Absolutely. Nia, if you could click through a little bit and I'll tell you what slide to stop on. So yeah, we can just skip the video because we had to have a video. Start right here real quick. So we set up a landing page. You can get there by visiting worksourcegeorgia.com/COVID. This is a living page. Essentially, we're constantly updating it with new information. One of the most recent updates, we created a zip code map for each local area because it was brought to our attention that within local areas and the counties that fall within them, there are multiple zip codes. So that dictates which service area or which center will serve you. If you do need COVID assistance, we can keep going, Nia. But we've seen a lot of traffic increase on the page. We can keep clicking through. But I think the big thing is that what we really want is to make sure that people know that the page exists. So we share our information through a WorkSource Georgia newsletter. All of you should be on the actual recipient list. If you haven't been receiving those WorkSource Georgia newsletters, please reach out, let us know so we can add you to that, because the more people that know about the page, the more that we can continue to deliver these services, especially during COVID-19. We can keep on here. Yep, keep going. Okay, keep going. Yeah, so please, if you haven't already, visit worksourcegeorgia.com/COVID. We're constantly updating that page with more information. And again, please sign up for the newsletter. We'll continue to push out information as we receive it about COVID-19 and what we're doing to serve individuals. That's all I got.
Thank you very much, Brittany and Shamika. And I know, folks, we did that fairly quickly. And Kristen, as I understand it, we'll be able to send the information out to the board members so they'll have a chance to review. And if questions come up, obviously they can reach out to us. And if we also could discuss some of these items in our next meeting that's coming up. And I know we'll see the technical college systems response to COVID-19 in November. And I think the one thing that we heard this several times today. This has continued on, and so we've had to continue to stay in this mode of modifying, adjusting, and responding. And so, it's again a testament to the fact that folks are figuring out ways to continue to make things happen. And I appreciate the response to the needs of the local areas, especially as they are serving the citizens who need our help, and as well as our partners here going forward. So a lot of good information today. Curious if are any just general comments or questions. And Kristen, is there anything else that I missed that we need to share or say with the group, or Jodan?
No, sir, we're good.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from any of the board members?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So What was that?
Chairman, this is Shamika. One more quick thing I wanted to mention. If you guys can access the chat, Andrea Young just posted the link to sign up for the newsletter to receive updates about what we're doing around COVID in the chat box. So if you want to click that link so it's up on your browser before you close out, I just wanted to mention that before we end the call. Sorry. Thank you.
No worries. Very good. It's real easy. I just did it to see how it works, and it just popped right up. So great. Please do. So spend a second doing that before you shut down. And I think our next board meeting is I don't know what the date is, November something. Somebody help me.
Yeah. I think it's November 20th, I want to say. Let me confirm. Yes, November 20th.
Okay, very good. So we might be in a little different venue format in terms of the system we use going forward, but I know we've had to make a lot of adjustments, and it can be a challenge to manage this number of people and the number of presentations and everybody engaging. But I do appreciate the hard work that everybody's put in to do this, and for all of our board members and all of our local areas and our commissioners and others who are serving, thank you very much for what you're doing during this time. Georgia needs our help, and it's extremely rewarding to be able to see the fact that all of us are charged in these roles and have these responsibilities, and we're all committed to doing these things together. We're making some hard decisions. Folks are adjusting to those hard decisions, but I couldn't ask for a better team, a better group of folks to be associated with. And so thank you again for your hard work. If you need me or any of us, please reach out to us. I know we're all working hard in our own respective areas, but I look forward to hopefully seeing you video-wise, at least in our next meeting. And again, thanks for what you do. If there's no other business, no other comments, I'll say we are officially adjourned. Thank you.